everyone. I am so honored to be speaking with author Michelle Kuo, and we're going to be talking about her debut book, which is called Reading with Patrick, and she has a copy of it, and she's going to hold it up for us so we can see the book.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, hold it up a little bit more because it didn't get on the screen. There we go. Michelle, you had me crying through this book, okay? I'm so excited to talk to you about it today.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Yes,
So kind.
I have found very emotional books this week. I've found myself crying like every day that I'm reading a book. So, but I kind of knew this would be a little bit of a tearjerker. But what a great concept for a book! I loved it. I can't tell you how much I loved this book. And right now, Michelle is in Paris. I'm in Pennsylvania, so it's like we've got a long distance between us, but you know, with the beauty of Skype, we can actually talk. So I'm really happy about that.
I know. It's much earlier there in the day than it is here.
I know. It's 4 here, so that means it's 10 there. So, you know. So I want you to tell everybody, like, how you ended up in Arkansas after going to Harvard.
Right. So, I guess I'd like to know that about myself as well. I mean, you know, I studied a lot of civil rights history in college, and the heart of the civil rights movement was in the Mississippi Delta, in Arkansas and Mississippi. And it's so interesting because America is so fascinated with civil rights history. You know, that's where we get a lot of our heroes, Martin Luther King being the most famous. And yet there seems to be so little interest in how the modern rural South exists today. It's still dramatically segregated. It's still the poorest part of the country. And I really wanted to continue that history and to know how people lived there today. And I wanted to be a part of the change there.
Right. And that was the best part about this is that, you know, you go down to this school where the kids, you know, it's so interesting. The other day, I was reading a statistic that said that 14% of United States citizens are illiterate. And I was talking to my boyfriend about it, and I was like, no way are 14% of this country illiterate, right? And he's like, I think it's true. And then I was reading your book, and I'm like, oh, there are, you know, because you think everybody has to go to school, so how do you graduate? How do you get through school? And you were finding these high school kids who really had a hard time reading.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think resources are so scarce there. The schools are really underfunded. Half of the staff at my school were substitute teachers, and it's difficult to attract teachers to rural Arkansas. And as a result of all of these things, and also, of course, because of generational poverty, many of the parents themselves don't have high school degrees. You have incredibly high rates of illiteracy.
Wow. And then to like want to be a part of that change. I love the way you taught these kids. And I am a homeschooling mom. I have homeschooled all 6 of my children. And so I don't have a teaching degree, but I'm out with my last child now. And I've learned so much about teaching. And what I was really relating to in your book is that some of my kids were really easy learners. Okay. My one son, I was trying to teach him how to read, and one day he like read, and I was like, "How did you do that?" And he's like, "I don't know. Like, I didn't even teach. I don't even know how." The kid like came out reading, you know. And then I had other kids that it was really difficult, and you had to figure it out. It's kind of like this puzzle. Like, how are you going to teach him how to read? You know. And so I love the process that you went through with Patrick, and just for everybody, Patrick was a student of yours that you had met, and then when you had moved away, you found out that he had committed a murder, unintentional incident that he was in, and then you went back and started teaching him in the jail. And that was just, that's part I was crying. It's like, you have all these opportunities, you have, you know, all these degrees, and yet you feel drawn to go back to that place and be a part of helping him.
I do. I did. I mean, I think that's what the purpose of education ought to be in some sense, right? That you don't do all of these things to accumulate your own privilege. You have to use it somehow. And I really felt like I had left behind people when I left Arkansas. And when I was there the first time as a teacher, decided to leave, it really was a kind of moral crisis when I realized I had to decide whether to stay or to leave, just because obviously people with means tend to leave rural places, and that's why they have such a scarcity of resources, because the people who have the opportunity to help don't. And I was one of those people.
Wow. And I really now I'm 53, so I'm a lot older than you. But what I really loved was how your heart in the beginning about pleasing your parents. In my culture, not so big. Such a big, I didn't really ever, I don't know. I was really thinking about it today too, because I have a younger brother, and my parents didn't really ever tell me, like, I had very little expectations put on my life, I have to say, and maybe a little bit more on my brother, but on me, it was just kind of like, well, you're going to get married, you're going to have babies, and that's exactly what my family did. And I did that. So I kind of fulfilled that, that for them. But when I was in my former life, before all my children, I was a legal secretary. And so I worked for a very large firm in Washington, D.C., and I loved that part of my life. And when I decided that maybe that would be something I'd go back to, I found out the job they don't even have legal secretaries anymore. It's not even a thing. They've been eliminated by computers.
Oh no. Did you
Excuse me?
Did you enjoy the job?
I did. It was a huge firm. We had 600 attorneys. I mean, it was huge. It was so much fun. Yeah, I had a great time. And I love the law. And we only did Supreme Court things, so I was very familiar with the Supreme Court law. And so I did enjoy reading, about your experiences with law and everything. So in another life, I would have gone to law school. I definitely would have, because I enjoyed it a lot. But
too late,
Okay. It feels a little too late, but okay.
Well, it's definitely not.
Yeah. So are you teaching over in Paris? What are you doing now?
I'm teaching law and society courses to undergraduates.
Oh, okay.
At a liberal arts college, and it's like 40% American and 20% French, and then the remaining 60. The remaining 40 are from all over the world. A lot of Middle Eastern students, some African, some Asian. So it's a pretty fascinating mix of students. It keeps me on my toes because I'm constantly learning new things about where people are from.
Well, and that's kind of how it was for you down in Arkansas too, right? The culture down there was completely, like being, I know even I went to New Orleans a couple of years ago. That's the closest I've ever come to that part of the South. And I really did feel like I was in another country. There really is a different kind of thing down there that I couldn't really put my finger on, but it is way different than I had imagined, Yeah. But, when you were dealing with Patrick, you were learning so much about his culture and how, and I really gave you so much credit because you kept showing up, okay, day after day after day. And, how did you do that? What was, what was your goal with him?
Right. Showing up is half of the secret in life. I tell it to my college students now when I try to get them to understand how important attendance is. But in the case of Patrick, that actually wasn't the hard part, because he was making progress so fast with his reading and his writing. You, as a teacher, become thirsty to see where you can take the student. And I had given myself basically a gift of 7 months of just making peace with Arkansas, and I didn't know that it was going to be about helping Patrick with his reading and writing. I'm not even sure what my goal was. I knew that I didn't want him to be functionally illiterate anymore, but I didn't know what literacy would look like. He was the one who taught me that, with his intricate, beautiful letters to his daughter, with his poetry. And that is, that's what's really remarkable about him and about people, is how much they how much you can't know about what they're capable of, and how they end up showing that to you.
Well, I was thinking when I was reading it, like, just your presence there. Like sometimes, like you said, you would sit in a lot of silence, but he knew you were going to come back. And I think that no matter what you taught him in, like with literature, I think more than anything, you taught him about showing up for people. Even when he wasn't so nice, or even when, he didn't always do the right things, you still, I don't think in his world he had somebody like you.
I think that is true. I think it is true that he didn't have somebody who showed up for him. Mm-hmm. And I think, in our own lives, right, that's what we mostly want from people.
Right.
So I don't know, like, I can't say how much it changed his life. It did change his experience of incarceration.
Right.
Yeah. So thank you for saying that. It always feels uncomfortable because you don't want it to sound like a savior story. And I certainly resisted that story in the book, right? Because at the end of the book, he's still struggling, and I leave again. But the days that I was there were remarkable, and I wanted to honor those days.
Right. And I loved how, because I've taught my children, reading and literature and everything, and I never thought of using poetry. You taught me a whole different thing, because I think that children are a little bit resistant to poetry. And then my kids that have gone into high school, that I've homeschooled them until they got to high school, and then they discover poetry and they're like, it sucks. I don't understand this poem. I don't know. And you got so much feeling out of him that I was like, I never really thought of it as such a tool to use to get feeling out of someone. And you know what, even if today, you'll never know, maybe you'll know the end of his story. Maybe you won't. It doesn't really matter. I think what mattered was what you were doing then. And it probably even taught you things about how to be a teacher, Yeah,
it taught me a lot about how to approach a text, about the kind of shared and equal space reading can create between two people who have incredible power difference. But I love what you said about poetry. It's such an underused, ill-taught part of our curriculum. Really I remember thinking what your kids did in school, like, I don't understand this poem, and then being paralyzed by that, rather than approaching it with a sense that you don't need to understand all aspects. You can get a sense of the mood and the tone, and then dissect the rhythm and the ideas after, and there's such a magical aspect of poetry that ought to be most accessible to children because they have such an ear for sound, and because they have that immediate sense and appreciation for silence, and because, like, the way a poem looks on a page, it's so much less intimidating. There's so much more empty space and time for you to absorb the words.
Right. Well, you kind of clarified something for me, because I'm still homeschooling my youngest son, okay? Mm-hmm. And he's been really resistant to reading. And I've asked people, like, what am I going to do with, I have children that are readers, like really good readers, and then I couldn't figure it out. And then this year, he's 14, okay? And we're studying World War II, and I picked The Book Thief to read. Together. He has his private reading, but then for together, right? And all of a sudden, he went from, last year and all the other years before being like, oh, do we have to read? Oh, I don't like this book. And now he's like, can we read first? And then I was like, when you said that in your book, like, you just have to find, like, I don't know how you find it. I got lucky, okay? But you got to find a book that makes them want to read to find out what happens. And with him, it was The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. You got him to read, and I love that book, so, I get that. But but it was like, this is a book that's not like that. So I thought he wasn't going to like it, but he's kind of identified with this girl in this book and, like wants to see what happens. And I never thought of it like that. Before, we always just finished the book. We just stuck to the plan. And I think this book makes him want to read. Like, it actually makes him want to, which then increases his vocabulary and makes it, more interesting. So you really got me.
Well done. So you were the maker.
Well, I didn't really realize it until I was reading your book, and I was like, oh, it's just that it isn't the reading that got easier. It's the finding a book that they care about,
Absolutely. I think that's absolutely true.
And it's gonna be different for everybody. So, but
exactly.
and the way you got your kids to write too. The way you got them when you were teaching in the classroom down there. Like, you actually got them students that nobody could have gotten to read and write, and you were able to get them to write also. So I think you're really special. You have a really special gift with teaching.
That's lovely to hear. Thank you.
On your days when you're really tired.
On some days.
Well, I think teachers are really, really important. So, even though I've homeschooled a lot of my children for different reasons, but it's been one of my favorite things about what I've done with them. So, I knew I was going to love this book, but I loved it even more. Like I said, it was so emotional for me, and just everything that you were experiencing with him was very emotional. And I hope he does well. I really do.
Thank you. Thanks for saying. Yeah, I got worried. But he's still young, like you said. I mean, he still has a whole life ahead of him.
He does, and who knows? Who knows? One day he might realize. And I don't know. Do you feel like he already does realize what you've done, or do you think that it's not really?
I think it's it's interesting you talked about showing up. I think that's what he appreciates the most.
Okay.
And not necessarily the reading and the writing, which meant so much to me.
Right.
The showing up, the talking to his lawyer, the presence.
Nobody, exactly, like that part of it. I mean, nobody was even, can you imagine what would have happened to him if you hadn't been speaking to his lawyer?
I'm not sure. I have no idea. It's hard to say whether he would have gotten the same plea bargain or whether he would have been charged for murder. I mean, I think for any person in any field, in any profession, knowing that you're going to be held accountable or that somebody's looking over your shoulder does make you sit up a little more straight, right? So exactly. It's just hard to know. And like I said in the book, the public defender had like hundreds of cases.
Yeah.
Had to travel across the Delta. Had no support whatsoever from the state. So I understood that his neglect wasn't malicious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, right, exactly. Did he know going in, like when you had come back after being gone for a while, and you'd come back, did he know that it was going to be just 7 months that you were going to be there? I mean, did he know there was only a certain amount of time that you were going to be there? Oh, okay. So it was understood between the two of you that you were eventually going back.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that was hard for me to tell him because you don't want somebody to get. You want to be upfront about what you can and can't do, know, and yeah.
Exactly. So what was it like when you had to leave after that 7 months? Was it really difficult?
It was really difficult in the sense that I knew how much, I knew that his writing and reading had indisputably transformed. There was no question to me, and I didn't know if that would last. And it was hard in the sense that, a relationship just changes if you don't live in the same place. Any kind of relationship, teacher-student, friendships. So I didn't know what our friendship would look like after. But it wasn't hard in the sense that I knew I was going to leave. I was older, so I didn't beat myself up as much about pursuing my own life. I was going to do legal aid, so I knew I wasn't selling my soul.
Yes.
It was strange. It was both a combination of being older and less hard on myself, but also still realizing that I had never been wrong in thinking that adult guidance in an isolated area to a young person makes a big difference. You know, it can't change the system, but it does make a difference.
Absolutely. And I think you, after doing that 7 months, I think it was a little bit easier because you did come back and then you did show up for him. And it was like, it made it okay to move on to what you had to do next. You know, you weren't abandoning anybody anymore or feeling like you were abandoning, you know, children.
I mean, I've been yeah, fully process like what that would look like, you know.
Right. Yeah. So anyway, are you going to be writing another book?
Oh gosh, I hope so, but I don't have any bright ideas right now. I'm pretty drained from writing this one. You know, I feel like I really laid it all out there.
You really did. You really did. I know it touched me, and I'm sure it's touched a lot of people. I mean, everything, you know, so everybody understands when they're reading this book, it isn't just about her. You know, Michelle, you give so much history. I learned a lot from this book about parts of the country that I didn't even know. You know, everywhere you went, you gave history about what you were going through and what it was like. And I really appreciate that part of the book. I really do. So,
yeah, I really wanted readers to. I mean, I learned a lot too writing it, trying to recover all of this history in rural Arkansas that even people in Arkansas don't. This not in their history textbooks, right?
Exactly. I think you can teach them too. So can you hold up the book one more time for everybody to see the cover?
Sure.
And I will have all of Michelle's links to her website and to her Amazon page and any other social media that you're on so everybody can find it. And I highly suggest reading this book. I mean, it is an amazing story, and I think you can write another one from there on. You know, I want to hear it all, so I think you can do it. It'll be great.
You're so much, Michelle. You're so encouraging. You're so lovely.
Well, thank you, Michelle. Thanks for, talking with me. I know it's late, and I'm so sorry, but thank you so much for making the time to talk with me, and I wish you all the luck with this book.
Are you kidding? Thank you for reading my book with such a...
Okay. Have a great night.
Okay, take care.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Bye.